Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. Ruth is a visiting professor at a large university in Ireland, and Claire is an associate professor at a primarily undergraduate university in Northern California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth, and today we're talking about helping students to take ownership. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. I've been spending some time planning a family trip to Baja California that I'm super excited about. We're going to... The main impetus of going is that it's on my bucket list to swim with whale sharks.
Ooh.
And... I didn't even know... I knew that, I've seen pictures of people swimming alongside whale sharks. But I didn't know there's regular whale sharks that come to Baja and you can book a boat to go out and swim with them. And it seems like, as from what I can tell, they do a really good job of making sure there's not too many boats at a time. It's all regulated so that you don't overwhelm the whale sharks, which is great. And you just go out in a boat and jump in and look at the whale sharks and then get back
I wish
in the
we were
boat.
doing a video so everyone could see you doing the...
Miming the goggles.
That's so cool. So how many, your immediate family?
Yeah, so Ralph, my husband, and then my parents and my brother are all going to go.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And
so
are
I'm
they all
super
going to go
excited
swimming
about
with you?
that. Yes, we're all going to go swimming with the whale sharks.
Dude, I love when you have a nucleus for something.
Uh-huh.
Do you know what I mean? And it's weird because even if it wasn't their dream, the fact that it's something that's really important to you and it's created this whole lovely trip and everyone's going to have a great time, it's just super interesting. I've talked on here about I'm really obsessed with this place, Newgrange.
Uh-huh.
And I just love it so much, and it's the most amazing place in the whole world. And I was really I've been desperate to go since we came back, but COVID and all the stuff. So we finally went, and the kids... and it was a bit I was making a bunch of people do this thing, and then we just all had a great time. Because I think having the nucleus where someone is oh, this is really important to me, it somehow, first of all, makes you go and do the thing, and you're going to have a lovely family holiday, and I love this. This is great.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. I had never thought about La Paz, Mexico, but that's where you go for the whale sharks. So then I was well, what else can you do in La Paz? And I was oh, this looks like a really cool place, actually. I'm glad we're visiting. And yeah, so it's great.
Okay, awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So I'll report back once we've seen them.
Yeah.
What it's like. What about you? How was your week?
My week, so I'm late to this party, but...
Okay.
Have you seen Ted Lasso?
Oh gosh, that sounds so familiar, but I don't remember.
Okay, so I feel everyone was talking about Ted Lasso for a while, and I think I'm more of a contrarian than I think I am. But as soon as
not
this,
into it.
Right, as soon as enough
popular.
people are saying something, I'm no. Anyway, so I don't know what my issue was, but I finally watched it. It is the most glorious thing.
Really?
It's so phenomenal and amazing. So I watched the first 2 seasons, and then I just went back and watched the entire 2 seasons again.
Oh,
because
wow.
it's so lovely, and it's amazing. So it's an American coach, who's an American football coach, is brought to England to coach a soccer team.
Oh, cool.
And it's very funny, but just unbelievably sweet. And there's just so many positive... So he's just basically a really nice mentor and coach, and really into building people up. And I think it's really... I want you to watch it so we can talk about it from a professional point of view. But there's just lovely things. And it kind of made me realise one thing. There's 2 women in the show. Mm-hmm. And I feel if this had been made 15 years ago, those ladies would be enemies. But instead they just have a lovely friendship. And anyway, it's just phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal.
How
it's
nice.
So good.
That sounds awesome. Is there stuff between the American and the British kind of cultures and that kind of thing? Is that part of...
A little bit, but it's kind of more he's very folksy, and he's very endearing and earnest. And so there is the English football fans are not endearing or earnest or any of those things. So there's definitely clashes, but it's quite sweet, and it's just very sweet. It's very lovely.
Right. Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
I'll look it up. And I love the idea that we can look at that. I'm assuming because there's coaching, we'll look at it from a teaching
Totally.
motivational perspective. That's really cool.
And there's so many interesting things. So I'm not spoiling anything for you, but like, because he's very like, no, it's all about just like making all of these players be really happy. And then at a certain point, someone is like, no, they have to win too. And that's actually sort of interesting from a professoring point of view, where
That
sometimes I want to just be like, we're all just having a lovely time. But then it's like, okay, but you have to give them a grade and they do need to succeed at some point. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of blew my mind. But I actually have a quote from it.
Oh, great.
So he has a lot of really random folksy quotes. But he said, as the man once said, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And this really struck me because, like, I think I've mentioned on here, I've been applying for jobs. And, like, I just so want to have the bolt of lightning happen, where it's just like, and this is the first job you applied for and you got it and they doubled your salary or whatever. And it's a numbers game, right? Like, you have to, you know, and it was the same when I was applying for the job, the tenure track job. Like, I had to be super strategic about it. And you want to be like, no, but if I just wrote the perfect cover letter and applied to this one job, it's all going to work out. You know what I mean? And so I think this really kind of impressed me. And I think it's really true with students too. But the harder, like, luck just isn't, it's, sure, everyone can get lucky in certain situations, but you really have to work hard to make that happen. And you have to line yourself up for the luck to happen. And you have to apply to 20 jobs, or you're not going to get any lucky win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I really like
the lucky breaks come more often when you've done the hard work.
Totally. So the harder you work, the luckier you get. So
I love it.
Yeah.
That's really great.
Yeah. Maybe we could even we should have an episode just about Ted Lasso. I swear you're going to love it. It's amazing.
Okay, I'll definitely look it up.
Okay, good. So today we are talking about helping students take ownership. And so will I tell you a little bit about my thoughts about this and you tell me? Okay. So I think for me, often I see this, particularly in students maybe transitioning from a situation where they were very much being told what to do, and there's a lot of external motivators for what they're doing, and really trying to get, like, you know, keeping your teacher happy or your mom not being mad about bad grades or whatever, and really trying to get students out of that kind of mindset into taking ownership of their own education and really, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Empowering them to know that they're in control of learning what they want to learn, taking out of the class what they want to take out of it, getting the grade they want to get, whatever it might be. Empowering them to take ownership of their studies, of their work, of their education, and all of that, so that they know that they can do that.
Totally. And then also sometimes taking ownership of not doing it. And
sure, I've decided not to do it, and that's okay.
Right. Instead of like, oh no, it's just because blah, blah, blah. And it's like, sure, whatever. But like, just, yeah, not kind of always looking to kind of the hierarchical, is that, I don't even know if I said that word right. Well, you know, the kind of authority figure at the front of the room. And yeah.
And so I'm kind of thinking as well a lot about the students who feel compelled to make a lot of excuses for why they haven't done something, or why they weren't in class, or whatever it might be. And I maybe I should just say what I think is working.
Yes,
at this point.
Please.
But so when that happens, I kind of wonder. One thing that I find is helpful is to consider what's the source of this issue, and sometimes maybe they're just in the habit of making excuses, and that's just what they do. And in that case, maybe it's don't take the excuses. You know, like I think we had an example one time about one of Ralph's professors who said, you know, Ralph was going and doing this research thing, and the professor said, "That's fine, but you're still going to get a 0 on the homework that you're missing," or whatever it is, you know. And so that's that kind of thing of not taking excuses. But the two that I want to focus on, why might there be this desire to make a lot of excuses? And I think either they don't know how to do what the task is, so they don't feel like they can. So they're like, well, you didn't set me up to be able to do it. I don't have the, you know, they have to come up with some. So in that case, you need to like empower them somehow, tell them how to start, give them some starting ground, something like that. This is a whole big preamble. I think the main potential issue is that they forgot why they're taking the class. They forgot what their motivation was. They forgot that they do want to know these things and build these skills. And now they're just thinking about checking the box of doing the assignment and getting the grade. And sure, at that point, it does make sense that you'd be like, well, can you just give me credit for it because I had this really good reason for not being there, and then I'll get the check mark because that's all I need. So in that case, I like to think about reminding the students why they're taking the class, why they're getting this degree, why they're and so I don't really know why they're doing it, but I can ask them, like, why are you taking this class? And they say, well, because it's required for the degree. And you say, well, why are you getting this degree? And hopefully get somewhere where they say, oh, you're right. Well, they don't have to say the words "you're right," but what I'm saying is hopefully they get to the point where they remember why they decided to be a physics major, or that maybe this will be useful at some point, or that they actually would prefer to know how to do the stuff rather than just have a check mark. Anyway, this whole long thing to say, I've found it useful in the past to try to consider the potential sources of where all this desire to make excuses are, and try to get them redirected towards doing what they actually want to do, which hopefully is learn the material, learn the skills, and be able to do what they came here to do.
You're so good at boiling stuff down. This is like, I'm like, oh, I hadn't really thought about this. So this is like, I mean, and it's so true. And then, like, ultimately, would they really feel like it was a win if you were like, yeah, no, it's fine, don't worry about it. You get an A, right. You don't ever, you're not going to learn how to do a single thing. Good luck with your next class. Like, it's so, yeah.
That's not a win, and I agree that they, even though that's what, in this moment of weakness, they are probably thinking they want, totally. I think it would be disappointing to get that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so hard, and I think it's interesting when you're saying, because I think there can be personal reasons why people do that, but there is a bit of a sense too of like whatever we're doing with the education system, that's the message some people get is just like, oh, like, you know, I've had students tell me too, like they play around with the grade book on Canvas and put in different numbers to see different permutations and combinations of how they're going to get a certain grade. And it's very understandable, but it's like this weird gamification of like, oh, well, if you did like all of this stuff rather than, okay, but I need to fundamentally, like, you know, it was interesting when you talked about the specifications grading and just the idea that there is a baseline of knowledge you need to have to get out of this class with a C or a pass. I don't know if they get that sometimes. Like sometimes it's sort of, how am I going to trick the sister? You know, or like what way can I do this and gather enough points? But I do think somehow they are getting that message, not just from themselves necessarily. So, and I have literally no idea. Because it's so weird looking at my kids. They're the exact opposite of that right now. And then look at daughters, but then when I meet people in university, you're like, what happened in between the period when you were 10 and just into stuff to this? You know what I mean? So it's interesting. So, but I think though, what I'm talking about today also is the specific people who kind of take it to the next level.
So tell me about that. Yeah. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So I think for me, the things that work, is like, it's great when you can get those people to just do something and have successes that they feel good about. And then if they can kind of, it's sort of going a little bit against what you just said, so well, kind of not, but like just getting the satisfaction of doing the thing instead of the amount of effort you're spending not doing the thing and making excuses for it.
Oh, that's great. Like, I love that.
And sometimes I've had students who were like, oh, I didn't think that, I thought that was going to take a lot longer than it did. And you're like, sure. And you like sent me 6 emails about this that like, or, you know, we went all around the houses and it was a lot easier to just do it. So sometimes, obviously I can't do this, but you just almost want to force them to sit down and put the pen in their hand and be like, just do the thing. I promise it's easier. And sometimes even, it's not even making excuses, but students will go and watch like 15 YouTube videos about it. And you're like, I swear if you just try it, it's going to be better. So I think whatever way that happens, giving them opportunities to do something and then feel the good feeling of, I did the thing and it was okay. So I think that...
That's so great. That's
Yeah.
really, I had not thought of that. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah, which I'm not sure if I have advice totally about how to do that. Sometimes it's like when they come to office hours
Yeah,
and
in
just being
office
like,
hours,
well,
it's
let's do it
doable.
right now. And they're like, no, no. And you're like, no, let's just try it and we'll, you know, whatever it is. So then I think I put this in my working, but I don't really know if it belongs here. But consequences, like having the consequence of like,
Yes.
okay, so yeah, I'm very sorry that, you know, whatever happened to like the tire of your car, whatever. I think that's too bad, but you know, yes, you're going to get a 0. So that I think is really important, and it's just I find it difficult, but I think it is really important, and it happens to all of us. Like there is just sometimes I want to do the 2 things, or this has happened and I'm really sick and it's super unfair that I have to go and drive my kids to school or go to like whatever it is, but sometimes it's just what has to happen. And
Right. Either you're going to drive your kids to school even though you feel sick, or you're not going to and they're going to stay home for the day, and either way, that's just what's going to happen.
Right, and there's no point in trying to... Sometimes in my head, I wish there was like a fairness police where you could go and petition and be like, no, but I'm really sick, so I really shouldn't do... And if they're just... But they aren't, right? And they're just...
Right.
That's where we have to come in and smile and nod and say, oh, yeah, but yeah, no, this you still have to do the thing.
Exactly. And we've talked about that before, and I love that you can be sympathetic. Oh, I'm sorry that your tire blew up on your car on your way here. And also refer to the late policy that everyone knows, that is clearly laid out in the syllabus, that no, too bad.
Right, and it's... Because, yeah, I think the other side of that is just anarchy, right? And the other side of that is really teaching... Like, if you go the other way, like, it is just really bad reinforcement that, like, if you can come up with a good enough excuse, you know, and then there is, like, in the real world, obviously, if you have a terrible car accident, sure, like, you shouldn't go to work that day. That totally makes sense.
Sure.
But it's just, yeah, this kind of, like you said, the box checking, and then if you get a permission from the professor, then it doesn't matter that you missed all of that stuff. But it still does matter. Right, because it
still does matter. You did miss it. You're going to have to learn that stuff somehow, or you're going to not know it, or whatever the consequences are. It's still true that you missed the thing. And I think I'd like to just remember that we did, when we all switched to virtual teaching, you and I both adopted a really flexible late policy, as I recall, and that ended up really not helping students.
Totally.
And, you know, people would get behind, and then you wouldn't know how far behind you were, and then you wouldn't be doing the assignments at the right time, and all of this. So I'm just reminding myself and everybody that that's why. That's one of the reasons to have the rigid... You know, there can be some flexibility, like you can have one special late assignment or whatever it is, but that's why I'm shying away from having a more flexible late policy.
Okay, I'm going to say things, and it sounds really patronizing, but I don't quite mean it this way. But I'm kind of likening, in this moment, professoring to parenting.
Okay.
In that, like I can't just let my kids do whatever they want, right? And they're really great kids and everything, but I can't just be like, you make your own dinner and go to bed whenever you want, because obviously that would be carnage, right? But in some ways, like when you're teaching, you're the adult in the room, and you really do have the expertise to look at this work and say... Like, no, look, I really know you had to do homework 1 to be able to do homework 2.
Yes,
or this
exactly.
is really... And I think that's something I feel uncomfortable with sometimes, being an authority, but, like, we have to accept, right, that, like, when you're a novice learner, you're just, like, flailing around and have no idea what's relevant or what's important. And so maybe it does seem like, oh, can I just get an excuse for not doing this lab or this homework or whatever? And they don't recognise... So I think that's another reason.
Of course they don't know the broader implications. But yeah, you're the expert in the class, you're the expert in the content, you're the expert in how to learn, all of those things. Yeah. That makes sense.
So I think just getting comfortable with that is something I need to get better at. And just like sometimes the consequences feel mean, but like you said, like we did have the experience of doing loosey-goosey, and then you can see it's not about, I mean... Obviously, there's always the implication that if you're grading stuff way beyond the grading date, it's more work for you. But also, like, it's just bad
also,
for
it's
them.
less good for the students. Yeah,
totally.
I agree completely.
Totally.
So, what are you working on?
So, my working on is when there's just excuse after excuse after excuse, and you just cannot like get through the excuse shield, and you just like, because sometimes with students I have conversations where I'm like, what's really going on? Do you know what I mean? And then they're like, hey, this is what's going on. And sometimes it's like, I'm just
I like that question.
terrified, like I can't do this, or whatever it is, and you can just get through it and move on. But sometimes when it's just like, no, but this, and this, or this isn't fair, and this, and like, it's just, and actually I kind of have a solution, but I haven't tried it yet. So,
oh, cool. What is it?
Well, a very sensible, accomplished friend of mine said that when this situation happens for students, they say, look, we're just not solving problems here. Like, and just using that phrase. And to me, that's really powerful, right? Instead of, because it's always this thing of like, well, if you give me permission to say that I can't do it, and you go, no, we're going to have to solve this problem, which is you have to do this assignment. So let's solve the problem instead of just listing reasons why you can't do it. Do you know what I mean? And so I haven't put that into practice yet, but I think I'm going to try that, because I think sometimes I get stumped when people have very genuine life hardships going on and things happening. And again, I sound like such a jerk, right? Because obviously the first time something happens, it's not a big deal and they get a pass, it's fine. But it's like when it's kind of habitual. But then just saying, like really framing it to them as like, how are we going to solve this problem? As in, the end point is you have to do this thing. So what are we going to do to make that happen? And try and get them into the mindset of solving the problem instead of listing all of the reasons why they shouldn't have to do it.
Yes, so, I love that.
Yeah.
You're asking the right question. How are we going to make this happen?
Right, right. And like, so if someone's like, well, I don't have the technology to do this, or I don't have, like whatever, you're just like, okay, but what are we going to do to solve that, instead of just saying that this isn't fair? Do you know what I mean? So I think...
Yeah.
Yes, but I haven't done it yet. But that's what I want to do, when you just have like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. You're redirecting the conversation. Like, yes, we've established that there are problems in the way of you doing this assignment. Now let's switch to how are we going to get you to be able to do this thing that you need to do to be able to learn the stuff that you're trying to learn in this class. And
sometimes the solution to the problem, again, this makes me sound so harsh, and I just want to say, like, it's for the extreme cases, but sometimes the solution is you're just not going to be able to do the class this semester. There's too many things happening, and that's the solution to the problem. But just the kind of stuckness of like, oh, I'm going to come to you with another reason why I didn't get this thing done. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes it can be, okay, well then, you know, we just need to move on, or you need to apply for extenuating circumstances, or whatever it is, but there just has to be some action taken, not just excuse after excuse. So, but I haven't done it.
I feel like what you're saying, the some action seems to me like it's forcing a change in trajectory. Like, the trajectory right now is not doing it and running into lots of problems. And so whether we start doing it, whether we come up with a different plan, whether we decide that you're going to do this assignment first instead of that assignment, whether we apply for extenuating circumstances, we're going to do something different than what we've been doing, because what we've been doing is not working.
Totally.
That's cool.
And I think, you know, and I'm thinking now, like, I've definitely had conversations with students in the past where I'm like, okay, so maybe this isn't the time for you to take this class. And sometimes the student is like, it totally isn't, and I'm so relieved that I can just... And other times they're like, wait, no, is that the other option? Because I do want to take this class. And you're like, okay, then we're taking the class.
That's a good point.
And this is a thing. And it's hard because you don't want to pull that out of your pocket too soon and really discourage people. But then sometimes there is, like, for me, it's like after the second midterm, okay, this isn't, you know, like, or whatever it is. But it is like, but that's your choice. Like, you are making a choice, and not doing the stuff is a choice to fail. Do you know what I mean? So,
and it might be the right choice. There might be too much going on in your life right now, and this is not the time to take the class, and you've actually been doing totally the correct thing by not doing this assignment, or whatever it is. And so acknowledging that's the direction we're going to go can be really great.
Totally. And like, I recently had a thing where it was a different interview, and they really wanted like quite a detailed, involved presentation. And I just was like not doing it. And then I was like, I'm just not going to do this interview. Like, it's fine. And then I cancelled it, and who knows, maybe it was the secret magic job that, you know, whatever.
Probably not. If you resisted it that much, you probably didn't actually want to do it.
Totally. And I just should have made that decision earlier on. and like taking ownership of that. But sometimes that's like the liberating thing, is just, oh, this isn't the time for this. Like, I was sick a couple of weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. It just isn't. But I can't call them and say, oh, how I was really sick, so I can't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what's that going to do? So, yeah.
Right.
So what about, what are you working on?
Yeah. Well, it's a related thing. I'm working on it being okay to not reach everyone.
Oh,
so I guess what I'm saying, I
yeah.
want to simultaneously, I have two things that maybe seem a little conflicting, but I don't think they are, and I want to hold them both as simultaneous beliefs. I will try to engage all of my students, and it's perfectly okay that not all of my students will end up engaged with my class. And that has to be true. Both of those are true. It's kind of like in a previous episode with Rachel Austin, she said she sets up the class, everyone can get an A, and she knows they're all capable of getting an A. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to do it for a whole bunch of reasons. But those are both true. So I'm going to try to engage all my students. I'm going to make efforts to engage the ones who aren't engaged. But it's okay that, not if, not all the students are going to end up engaged in my class. Maybe they'll be super engaged in some other class, and my class is just the secondary thing that they've got to do. If that's true, that's fine. I'm going to try to engage them, but I might not be this might not be the content that they're going to be engaged with right now for whatever reason, and that has to be okay.
That's so
I want to hold
powerful,
those both as true.
because I feel like it really gets you too. It's just not personal, and sometimes it feels hella personal, but it's not actually. Do you know what I mean?
Not.
And
sure,
like you said, sometimes you just have, like, it wasn't personal that I couldn't do that interview. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's just, but that's so, yes. And sometimes too, like, you kind of also, you can't chase everyone down. Do you know what I mean? And you can't necessarily invest huge amount, and this was definitely a huge mistake I made in early days of teaching, was investing massive amounts of energy in the one totally disengaged student.
And it was student who was investing very little energy. Totally. And I think you should reach out to that student. Absolutely. And you should try to engage that student. But that student might not be interested in this material right now. It might have the bandwidth for the material right now. It might not be interested in the content at all. Like, it might not be possible to reach that student with this content right now. And that's okay.
Yeah. I love that. That should be one of the things that's on one of our t-shirts someday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because the thing that's really blown my mind is when this has happened for, like, students registering for research credit, when we had that. Okay. Because you're like, this is absolutely voluntary. Like, you really don't need to do that. And then if they're making excuses, you're like, what? Like, you just don't even need to take this, be part of this research group. So that's super interesting too, where, yeah.
That's a really good point. Because with the research, it's like you joined my research group, and the whole point was for you to get something enriching experience and contribute something, hopefully, to the lab. And so if that's not happening, that's not happening. We don't get that bonus thing, but that's all it means.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like, and the thing is, I can really relate. Like, I've gone through certain phases. I'm thinking particularly of when I started grad school, of just always looking for excuses, and even in my own head. But when you're like, oh, if the professor's like 2 minutes late, I can leave, right? Like, I can, that kind of thing. And
yeah,
like,
is that a thing? Like, you're like trying to figure out if legally that's true and you can stand behind it, when, like, really the whole point was, didn't you want to learn from this person?
Totally. And it's like, well, and then what? But, like, I'm like, sweet, then I got to leave and no one can be mad at me about it, right? And it's just, yeah. And I definitely have had times like that too, where I'm like, oh, I want the fairness to police to say that I don't have to do that assignment and it's fine. And so I can definitely empathize, totally. But it's
Me
so
too, of course.
Frustrating sometimes when you have, it's difficult.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm sure we've all been there. And in helping students, it's trying to get them to have the mindset that's more what's actually happening. What's actually happening is they signed up to take a class to learn some stuff from this person who knows a lot about that stuff. And so if that's what we're doing, it seems obvious that what we're doing is trying to learn from this person. But it's so easy to forget it and be like, gosh, why are they making me be here for this class? And, whatever it is.
This is so helpful. This is why I love this podcast. because like, so when my girls were born, I remember being like, well, I'm not going to be an authoritarian. I'm not going to yell. And obviously I failed at that. But anyway, but you're like, sometimes when you kind of think about, like, when I started teaching, I'm like, I'm going to be so nice to students and really understanding. And that just doesn't always look like what you think it's going to look like at first. You know what I mean? So like accepting all of the excuses and letting students like, and being just only empathetic without holding people to things. I think there's somebody at our old university had a great phrase, which is like being the warm demander. And I keep forgetting it. And then when I remember it, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do.
Right.
Like,
we're trying to help these students learn these skills and learn this content, and that has to require us getting them to work on it, of course.
Totally. Okay, thank you. That was super helpful.
Thank you, Ruth. Great topic choice.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.